What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the On the Ball podcast here on the Right Wing Sports Network's YouTube channel. I'm your host, Ashri Rahman, joined by my co-hosts, Christian DeBlock, Will Lochner, Thomas Stapleton, and Aiden Maher. Guys, how are you guys doing today?
I'm doing great. Excited to talk some free agency, post-draft stuff. It's going to be great.
For sure. And there is a lot of things that went on in the NBA this week. We've had the draft, obviously. We've had a couple trades before the draft, after the draft. And obviously, if you guys have been paying attention to the NBA, which obviously you guys do because you would be here, yesterday was the start of free agency, and several things have gone on with multiple teams. Some teams have had better days rather than others, and we're going to break it all down right here. So with that being said, let's break down the first trade of the week, which was earlier this week, which we never got to. Chris Paul to the Suns for Kelly Oubre, who's now going to Golden State. But for Kelly Oubre, basically Chris Paul to the Suns for a bunch of draft compensation to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Guys, how do you feel Chris Paul will fit in with Devin Booker and the Phoenix Suns? Do you think this was a good trade for the Suns, or do you think they should have kept their young talent like Oubre?
Yeah, so I'll start. I think this is a really good deal for the Suns. I mean, excuse me, just considering what they gave up, they didn't give up really a single, besides Ricky Rubio, a single critical piece from the bubble, because obviously Kelly Oubre wasn't in that bubble run when they went 8-0. So in that sense, they don't really need him that much. Kelly Oubre, he's not exactly a critical piece to that core just because they did so well without him. Still a nice piece to have, but when you're getting Chris Paul in return, I think it's still a good deal. You also hold on to the 10th pick, which they drafted Jalen Smith. He's probably going to be a nice backup big for them off the bench, which is good. And you're getting, obviously, Chris Paul just came off one of his most impressive seasons in his career. And he still projects, even though, his contract is still huge, but Phoenix has enough to absorb that money. And you're also, for the longest time, we've questioned, did Devin Booker, is he going to leave the Suns? The Suns have been doing a bad job of, putting together a team around him. But now finally, adding Chris Paul and with the other pieces that they have on this team is going to be in the playoffs. I wouldn't call them necessarily a lock for the playoffs, just considering how stacked the West is. But I think Chris Paul vaults them into the playoff race for sure. And I think you can make an argument that they're firmly on that second tier of Western Conference teams.
I think you have to look at this as a win for Phoenix. Some people are going to be like, oh, well, they should have kept their young assets and continued the rebuild. This rebuild has been going on for a long time. We need to start seeing some results. And if anyone's going to push the needle, it's going to be Chris Paul. Let's look at what he did for OKC this year. He came in, everyone, including myself, thought the Thunder were going to be pretty bad. And he ended up turning that team around. They were the 5 seed. He was an NBA All-Star. He clearly knows how to win. He knows what it takes to win, and I think Devin Booker is going to appreciate having someone like Chris Paul who wants to win at all times. And I think Chris Paul is going to do wonders for the young guys in Phoenix, guys like DeAndre Ayton, who had probably the most low-key 19-12 season I've ever seen in my life. And, I like their young wings, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson. They've got a foundation. They've got a really great foundation with their young guys, and I think Chris Paul is going to make everyone around him better. And I think they're a playoff team in the West, no questions asked.
Guys, before we continue on the more important trade, we're going to break news here. Brad Wanamaker has just signed with the Golden State Warriors. So, Steph Curry, your job is in jeopardy. Brad, I'm kidding.
Blockbuster.
But talk about Chris Paul to the Suns, how you think it's going to work out. Do you see the Suns as a title contender or just a step below?
I see them as a step below still, but that doesn't mean this was a W for Phoenix. I completely agree with what Will and Thomas said, but to just throw one more positive in there, the culture. Monty Williams has done a great job of improving the culture there, but you can still take that next step, and Chris Paul does that. Chris Paul is going to come in here, really bolster up that winning culture. Phoenix is just a long drought right now, but with Chris Paul, they're going to make the playoffs. And that's what Phoenix needs. They need to give Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton and those young guys, they need to give them some playoff experience. And they need to give them a mentor like Chris Paul who's going to help that culture and push them to be better. I understand that they're giving up almost all their assets. They're not going to have a lot of money. And they're not going to win a championship. We have to look up, beyond that. Chris Paul's going to push them into the playoffs. He's going to, again, push them to work harder. And then after this, they've got that, their culture is going to be better. I think culture is one of the most important aspects in the NBA. And now when all of this is said and done, when Chris Paul walks away from Phoenix, they've got that winning culture. It's going to attract some free agents, and they can make some title runs then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with all the points you guys made. It's funny because this team hasn't made the playoffs since 2009-10, so they had to do this. I think they were running out of time before Devin Booker was going to get really frustrated and end up asking for a trade. We saw this team play really well, went 8-0 in the bubble. That most notably that fadeaway shot on the Clippers that Devin Booker hit to really keep them going in that run. So it's pretty remarkable that this team is going to do that. And then now they will make the playoffs. I expect that. I think because most people thought the Thunder were going to be one of the worst teams in the Western Conference last year. And then Chris Paul decides and ends up putting this team in the 5th seed. So I think this team is definitely going to make the playoffs. It's a great move for them. They did give up some assets, but in reality, this is a thing they had to do, in my opinion.
Yeah. Also, fun fact, I believe Monty Williams played with Chris Paul. So that's kind of funny now that he's coaching a team led by Chris Paul.
Yeah, in terms of the Chris Paul, I don't really think they're championship contenders in Phoenix, but this is the best team that they've had since their Steve Nash, Amari Stoudemire days. Like, honestly, you can make that argument because you have Chris Paul, one of the best point guards in the NBA, Devin Booker, one of the best shooting guards in the NBA, and DeAndre Ayton, who's rising as an emerging center in the NBA. So I think with that big three, it really comes down to DeAndre Ayton's development. If DeAndre Ayton can take that next step, and we know that DeAndre Ayton was not worth the number 1 overall pick when he was taken over Luka, Trey, guys like that. But if he can at least live up to some of those expectations, this Phoenix team can be really dangerous. And I think with Chris Paul, who elevates everyone around him, I think DeAndre Ayton is going to have the best season of his career.
And I don't know if I'd take, outside of Luka and Trey, obviously, I'd probably take Ayton over every other player in that class. Does that mean he was worth the number 1 overall pick? No. But he's gonna be a top 5 center in the league one day. He's already really, really close.
He's pretty much almost there. He's almost
yeah. I mean, yeah, outside of Cat, not in any order, Cat, Embiid, Jokic, Bam, and Gobert, he's probably right there at 6. And if he just takes that next step forward, he's one of the most polished big men in the league. If he can just continue to develop that jump shot, he's going to be
I don't believe he's at 6 quite yet. I would probably take Brook Lopez over him for now. But with Chris Paul, I doubt it, but I wouldn't put it past him to pass Gobert by the end of this year.
Also, just to add one more note, DeAndre Jordan was an all-NBA player when he played with Chris Paul. And DeAndre Jordan, for his entire career, has had no kind of offensive creation skill set whatsoever. And he was an all-NBA player when he played with Chris Paul. So I'm expecting DeAndre Ayton, who has a very good offensive skill set when it comes to shot creation in the inside. I'm expecting him to break out.
Yeah, one of the big things with DeAndre Ayton's game was his jump shot. Like in college, he had a jump shot, but in the NBA, he hasn't really utilized it quite often. He's only taking like 5 attempts a year. If he really can develop that jump shot really well, I think he could stretch a floor. Phoenix is even more dangerous. It all comes down to Ayton. I think everything else is set in stone with Phoenix. But we're going to move on. There are a lot more deals, a lot more trades, a lot more things going on. But we're going to recap the draft. Give some of the main teams their grades. Some teams did horribly. Some teams did great. So we're going to start off with the Minnesota Timberwolves, who obviously selected at number 1. Thomas, what grade would you give the Minnesota Timberwolves in this draft?
For this draft, I would probably go back and forth between an A- or a B+. I think Anthony Edwards is going to be a great player, and a lot of people are saying Andrew Wiggins 2.0. I don't see it. I don't think that's going to be the case with Edwards. I think some people might disagree. I think he's more mentally driven than Wiggins. And granted, that's not really saying much, but I do think Edwards does want it, contrary to popular belief. I've seen him in interviews. He knows what he needs to get better at. He knows what he needs to work on. And he's got the talent to be the number 1 overall pick. I think there are better guys, but with that being said, I still think he's extremely talented. They also picked up Jaden McDaniels at pick 28. That is a steal. That is a huge steal. And I think that those two guys are going to be part of their core for a while. I'm a big fan of McDaniels, probably more than anyone else I know. And Edwards is going to be a great player. I hated the Bolmaro selection. I just don't like him I don't like him. But regardless, I'm still going to give them probably an A- just because I think Edwards and McDaniels are great players. They're going to be in the league for a long time.
Aiden, what about you?
I'm leaning towards maybe a B plus here. Similar to Thomas, I hated the Leandro Bolmaro pick. Draft and stash players don't pan out. I get the potential. I get all that. He's got an intriguing upside, but I just don't see it panning out. But Jaden McDaniels and Anthony Edwards are two really solid selections. Anthony Edwards was the right pick if they were going to say it number 1 overall. They should have traded down, but clearly there wasn't a deal there, so don't force it. Just take the best player that you see available. I like the Edwards pick. And then Jaden McDaniels, I'm not as high on him as Thomas is, but the upside's there. And that's a low-risk, high-reward type of pick. It's the late first round. I mean, most of these guys don't pan out, but if you can develop, again, I know they don't have a great development staff out there in Minnesota, but Jaden McDaniels, he's already, got some sort of skill set offensively to the point where he can create his own shot. I know he's somewhat inefficient. He is inefficient. But it was a great selection, and overall, I'm going to lean towards more maybe a B here.
Christian, what about you?
Yeah, along the same lines, I love the Anthony Edwards pick. I think that fits really well with what they wanted to do. I did personally think LaMelo Ball would go 1, but you can't go wrong with Anthony Edwards. Similar to Thomas, I'm not too sure that this issue with the mentality of being able to play, and similar to Andrew Wiggins, I think he'll be fine in the NBA. That's not an issue to me. And Jaden McDaniels, it fulfills a need. They needed help at that wing/power forward position at 6'10". I think he helps them a lot. And this team, while they probably won't make the playoffs, I would probably give them as well. I'd give them a B+ just because they did really fulfill a lot of the needs. I didn't like the pick as well, the Bolmaro pick, but overall it was a good draft for them.
Will.
Yeah, I'll give them a B+. I basically echo every sentiment you guys had. I would just say, in terms of the Timberwolves' outlook for this year, I think they'll be competitive, but I don't think, with how stacked the Western Conference is, there's no way they're making the playoffs. And it's mainly just because defensively, their 3 best players are not good defenders. And, you have Okogie, who's a really good defender, and Jarrett Culver, who could be a good defender, but there's, again, a little bit just too much possibility there. And their their backcourt is actually pretty stacked when you look at it. So it'll be interesting to see how their rotations are this year. But again, I like the Jaden McDaniels pick because that's just great value where they got him at the end of the first round. So again, offensively, this team projects to be very, very good moving forward. They can score a lot of points, but they're going to give up a lot of points as well. And so ultimately, they'll be in the hunt, but I don't think that they're going to end up being a playoff team this year.
Yeah, in terms of the Minnesota Timberwolves, I thought they would take LaMelo Ball, but Edwards is the right pick. He's a perfect fit with that team. People have motor issues with him. There's also been this new narrative that he doesn't want to play basketball. I just find that completely blasphemous. He literally said, if you just look into it, that he prefers to watch football over basketball, which isn't a bad thing at all. So in terms of those narratives that Edwards is lazy, he doesn't have love for the game, I just think that's kind of blasphemous. But in terms of the draft grade, I'd give them an A-. The Bolmaro pick, I'm going to be completely honest, I did not know who that was. Aiden and Thomas knew much more about this draft than I did. I'm like, who is this guy? Because they did trade up for him, which didn't really make much sense. Go ahead.
There's a reason you don't know who he is.
What?
There's a reason you don't know who he is.
That's the reason. Like, it's Leandro Bolmaro.
Yeah, but they traded up for him, which really didn't make much sense at all. To many, it's a very Minnesota Timberwolves type of move. They made good moves though with Jaden McDaniels. He has boomer bust potential. You take that risk. You're Minnesota. I mean, you're not going to contend for a title take the best player available, see what you could do with him. I think it was a good move. I'd give them an A- just because the Bolmaro pick kind of knocked their grade down. But other than that, I think they had a really good draft. And we're gonna move forward to the Golden State Warriors. And minutes prior to draft time, they announced that Klay Thompson, and if this goes out to Klay, we're all wishing for your speedy recovery. But Klay Thompson is out for the season with the torn Achilles, and they took James Wiseman with the number 2 pick minutes later. Do you guys think that looking back in that same position, would you take James Wiseman number 2? Do you think they should have traded back for a guard or possibly even taken Melo? Or do you think James Wiseman as a center was the right pick?
I'm just not a fan of taking centers that high in the draft, period. Unless you have a clear skill set that is like really good in the NBA. But with Wiseman, it's kind of like he's more of a traditional big. And yes, you can you can look at it and be like, what if his jump shot pans out? What if he becomes more quick decision maker? What if his playmaking instincts improve? Well, that's a lot of big questions. Now, I think Golden State is actually one of those teams that can help him improve in those areas. But with that being said, I would have had that if I was the Golden State Warriors. I would have much rather wanted to trade back, either get someone like Onyeka Okongwu, who I think is better, and I don't think it's that close, or I would have or get a Tyrese Halliburton and just have him as your backup guard. But in terms
he wouldn't be a backup this year.
Oh yeah, true. Well, with Klay being out, yeah, or just take LaMelo. Like, don't overthink it. Just take the best guy available and worry about the fit issues later if there even are any. So yeah, Golden State selecting James Wiseman, and it's like, I'm not a huge fan of it. I really can't lie. I really won't lie. I'm not a huge fan of the move, and I think there were much better options.
I completely agree. I just kind of echo what he said. I would have 1,000% traded down in that spot. You look at kind of the guys that were rejected to go top 10, almost all of them would have been great picks for the Golden State Warriors. Meanwhile, they decide to take James Wiseman at number 2. Again, like, unless it's like a transcendent center, you don't take them that high. James Wiseman is not a transcendent center. And I don't understand why they didn't take the Wendell Carter trade. Wendell Carter, number 4, again, assuming these trade rumors were true, I take that in a heartbeat. Trade down 2 spots, grab Wendell Carter Jr. He's going to fill in your need at center, and you can still take a great prospect. Like, the Golden State Warriors had a ton of options. Like, they loved a ton of guys for a reason in this draft towards the top. So if I were them, I 100% would have traded down. I'm not a big James Wiseman fan. Matter of fact, I didn't even think he's the best big man in this draft. So, yeah, kind of just to echo what Tom said, I would have traded back.
Yeah, in terms of James Wiseman, I like James Wiseman a lot, like as a person, but I also have Onyeka Okongwu over James Wiseman as a prospect. We're gonna get to Onyeka Okongwu and the Atlanta Hawks later on the show, but I think that was an absolutely great pick. But in terms of Okongwu, he's just a better center. Like, you look at it skill set for skill set. Offensively, you can argue James Wiseman's better. I'll give you that, even though it's not by a Grand Canyon margin. But defensively, Onyeka Okongwu's switchability, his defense in the pick and roll with James Wiseman's a terrible pick and roll defender, and just his tendencies, I would rather have that on my team. Especially with the Golden State, with Draymond Green, I'd rather have that. People are concerned, oh, well, the Golden State Warriors, they don't have a player over 6'10". Who cares? Who cares? It's a modern NBA. Bam Adebayo is 6'11". Do you think that he care? No. I mean, are you going to start Myers Leonard because of that? No. Like, it's just common sense. You don't need someone who's over 7 foot in the modern NBA to play the center position. So I think in terms of that, they could have traded down. They could have taken Halliburton as well. But I think the fact of the matter is the reason the reason why there's so much backlash to the Wiseman pick, which isn't a terrible pick. He still fits. I mean, he's still going to be good, I guess, with Steph. But the reason why it's getting so much backlash is because Klay was injured minutes before, and they knew that they had a decision to make with Klay. Klay's injury pending. So I think you could have made a much better choice at that position, especially with a team like Chicago that took Patrick Williams number 4 overall. You don't think you could have found a way to finesse them for a trade? I think you could have.
Yeah, the way I see this is it's not bad, or I don't love it, but I also don't like hate it. I like it just because you get a player who, you do need a center, and James Wiseman can definitely do some stuff for the Golden State Warriors that will help them. I mean, for James Wiseman, this is great. You're in maybe the best position possible to be like to hit your ceiling because of Steph Curry and the system that's in Golden State, and their historical track record of how they've been able to develop players. So great for James Wiseman. For the Warriors, it's decent. I hear what you guys are saying about trading back. I will say, when it comes to trading back, it didn't seem like the reason there weren't any trades is just because I feel like no one seemed to want to trade or want to be willing to make a deal. There's no deals really on the table. The way I see it, though, is the Warriors were really kind of banking on themselves being able to develop James Wiseman because, the Klay news kind of came out that day. So I don't think that they were necessarily scouting people to fit with Steph Curry. They were kind of just focused in James Wiseman's going to be our guy. And they just looked at all the players available and they're like, LaMelo Ball, does he really fit with Steph Curry? Oh, maybe we don't know. So we're just going to pick James Wiseman. And that's going to be kind of our safe pick to do it. So overall, I like it.
Before Christian says something, the reason that most teams, or I shouldn't say really any teams, no one traded up because no one wants to trade up in a draft where there's so many question marks with the top guys. Now, obviously, prospects are going to have flaws, but with this draft in particular, like the top guy, my top guy, LaMelo Ball, has 2 big flaws with his shooting and his defense. And those are real question marks. So no one wants to sacrifice future assets, especially when you look at the 2021 draft, which is absolutely stacked, and the 2022 draft, which is going to be the double draft, where they get the college freshmen and the high school seniors, where you're getting Emoni Bates and Chet Holmgren and a bunch of other guys. No one wants to sacrifice picks for those years because the classes are absolutely stacked. So some people were saying that I thought this too, that this draft is going to be super trade heavy, but the reality is no one wants to trade up in a class where the prospects at the top have so many questions.
To address the comments, Tom said Wiseman fits the Warriors system more than Double O and Onyeka Okongwu does. I couldn't disagree more. Even if you think Wiseman could be the better player or the better prospect, Onyeka Okongwu is a much better fit in that system, especially defensively. With his switchability and his pick and roll defense, like I mentioned earlier. In terms of that system, Onyeka is probably the perfect fit for a center.
Yeah, one question though.
Even offensively, I'd argue. Sorry to cut you guys off.
Yeah,
but James Wiseman, there's potential, especially like if they had a guy like Klay there. I know they don't anymore, but he could be a bit of a black hole at times. Like Onyeka, I'm not saying he's perfect, but he's not gonna, demand. I'm not gonna say James Wiseman is going to be demanding shots, but he's not really going to demand as many shots, or at least take as many shots and be such a black hole like James Wiseman potentially could be on the post if he doesn't develop a jumper.
Yeah, my only thing is whoever I think develops a jump shot quicker or just a better jump shot between Onyeka and James Wiseman will probably ultimately be the better player. I'm not sure which guy right now projects to do that. Thomas, do you guys really have a?
I'd go Onyeka.
Okay.
To be quite honest.
Yeah, he's shown good flashes in the mid-range.
There is one thing you have to keep in mind with Wiseman. He only did play 3 games, so there is a limited sample size. We don't know how much he's improved in his meantime, but based off what we know, I'll take Onyeka.
Yeah, in terms of what the Warriors should have done on draft night, I think it was so close. I think it was 30 minutes prior to the draft that we figured out that Klay Thompson could be out for the season. So it was going to be really difficult to have them maybe just switch up their whole plan. Personally, I would have probably taken LaMelo Ball there, and that's my opinion. But I think Wiseman in a system like the Warriors, because I think the Warriors have a pretty good chance of developing him, regardless if you think he's better than if he's the best center in this draft. I think they have a good shot of developing him because they're really good at developing players, especially in recent history. But yeah, I think there definitely were some certain question marks on whether he should have been that pick. I don't know where he would have went had he been not drafted at 2, but in my opinion, I think it's not a terrible pick. I think the Warriors have a good shot of at least developing into a solid center. But I don't know. I would probably have still taken LaMelo Ball there, but it's not terrible.
Yeah, and in terms of the comments Steven did, I don't think anyone ever doubted that the Warriors are going to develop him into a good player. It just which player would have been the best fit, which player would have been developed the most, and which player should have been that pick. And I quite frankly think it should have been Onyeka Okongwu, or you trade back for Tyrese Haliburton. But we're going to move forward here, and we are going to get to Thomas's second favorite team, probably favorite team this season, the Atlanta Hawks, who did take Onyeka Okongwu on draft night. Excellent pick. Probably going to move on from John Collins. It's looking like that because they have Clint Capella, John Collins, now Danilo Gallinari, who signed today, Onyeka Okongwu. But they're absolutely loaded. They also signed Rajon Rondo, Chris Dunn. All of those pieces which they signed and traded for, or drafted, my bad, this pieces which they drafted and which they signed fit really well with their team. Chris Dunn, defensive point guard, who goes well with Trae Young, who's an offensive point guard, and Chris Dunn can't create offense while Trae Young can't play defense. Goes hand in hand. And then you have Danilo Gallinari providing extra offensive firepower. I don't really see the need for John Collins there anymore. And then you have Clint Capella, who could start for about 5 games probably, and then you move Onyeka Okongwu to the center position. I really like what the Hawks are doing. I'm going to get to Thomas because this is his favorite team to talk about. What are your thoughts on what the Hawks are doing, and do you think they're going to be a top 5 seed in the Eastern Conference?
Absolutely. I said it. I forget what it was. It was a couple weeks ago. I said, look, the Hawks right now, their roster as constructed, no, they probably were not going to be a 5 seed. But I knew that they were going to make moves. They had clearly said that they wanted to get guys in free agency and improve that roster, and even the front office was under pressure to make the playoffs. So I knew they were at least going to make the playoffs, and with the additions, I thought they were going to be a top 5 seed, and now I absolutely stick by that. I mean, let's look at their team. Trae Young, Cam Reddish, Danilo Gallinari, John Collins, Clint Capella, Rajon Rondo, Chris Dunn, Kevin Huerter, DeAndre Hunter, Onyeka Okongwu. That's 10 players. That is a 10-man deep roster with guys that can contribute in their own way. Trae Young is an absolute offensive superstar, and now he actually has the defenders around him to hide him on that side of the ball. And I mean, you've got a ton of shooters with Reddish, Gallinari, depending on if they keep Collins, Hunter, Huerter. You've got great defenders. They've got everything. They've got everything that it takes to be a great team. And while some people are going to say, oh, well, yeah, but the East is, there's a lot of talented teams in the East, and I agree. But I think that the Hawks there's going to be some teams that aren't necessarily as great in the regular season. I think a team like the Nets, I would much rather in a heartbeat take the Nets over the Hawks in a playoff series. But in the regular season, I think the Hawks have a better record because I think the Nets are going to be a team that maybe goes through some injuries, load management, all that kind of stuff. So I'm big on the Hawks. They've got a foundation for success with their young guys. Now they've added veteran players to the mix. I am really, really excited to see what they do next year. And they're my breakout team in the Eastern Conference.
My one question with let's say they move on from John Collins, right? Onyeka and Clint Capella, I'm not saying it's a terrible fit, but let's just think about offensively. Now, I think the Hawks will absolutely make the playoffs. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. And I like them too, not as much as Thomas, but I definitely like them. Onyeka and Clint Capella, though, I do have a couple questions about how they're going to fit offensively. John Collins was a better fit with Clint Capella, if you ask me, because Clint Capella made up for his lack of offense and lack of defense. And John Collins made up for Clint Capella's lack of offense. With Onyeka Okongwu, though, we all know Clint Capella doesn't have much of an offensive skill set. He mostly just catches lobs. Right now, Onyeka, I think there's a lot of pressure on him to develop a jump shot because him and Clint Capella can't really coexist offensively. I understand they have a lot of spacing around those two guys, so it shouldn't be a huge issue. But I just look at their offensive skill sets are both very limited at the moment. None of them can space the floor. Neither of them can space the floor. So just from that, I just want to throw that out there. That's why I don't adore the Onyeka Okongwu pick like some others do. I think it was an all right pick. But yeah, the offensive spacing.
Here's what I'm going to say to that. If I were the Hawks, what I would do is, I don't know what's going to happen with Collins, but I don't know if he stays on the team to start the year, to be quite honest with you. I think he either gets signed and traded or they just let him go. I don't really know what's going to happen. But if I'm the Hawks, I start Onyeka Okongwu at the 5, and I play Gallinari at the 4. You want to talk about a good offensive fit spacing-wise? That's a great fit. And then maybe you can start Hunter at the 3 and Cam Reddish at the 2, or put Cam Reddish at the 3, Chris Dunn at the 2. I think starting Onyeka Okongwu over Clint Capella gives you a lot of and moving John Collins out of there gives you a lot of options and a lot of flexibility with that roster.
Does that include a Clint Capella trade?
No.
Are you just benching him?
Just bench him.
Right.
I mean, he's a solid big, but am I looking at Clint Capella like, wow, this is my franchise center for the next 5 years? Absolutely not. Just let Onyeka Okongwu get in. Let him develop chemistry with Trae Young, because that's the center they're going to be committing to long term, not Clint Capella. So I would just bench Capella, to be quite honest.
Yeah, the way I see this is there's just so much balance and versatility on this team. I mean, there's so many different possible lineups that you can make, with Trae Young being the point guard, that are going to be successful for this team. I do question, especially since John Collins, I believe there's reports that he's asking for like a max contract. So with him, I mean, you can use him as a stretch 5 offensively. That's great. But defensively, he cannot guard. He is not big enough and not strong enough to guard 5s. That's his problem. You have an Onyeka, you have Clint Capella, but you also have Gallinari now, who Gallinari historically, earlier in his career, he played the 3, but in the last couple of years, he's been more of a 4. So I kind of question what kind of lineups they'll be throwing out there, at least for this season. I do definitely see either Collins or Capella getting moved at some point. Maybe it's at the trade deadline. Maybe it's next offseason. I don't think it'll necessarily be this offseason. They'll probably just see what they have and see what lineups work best, and then they'll trade whoever isn't really fitting in with the roster. But to address the Rajon Rondo signing and Chris Dunn, I think that's perfect. You have, let's just say that they start Chris Dunn at the 2 with Trae Young. I mean, we talked about earlier, Chris Dunn that's all he does is defense, and that's all Trae Young can't do is defense. And Kevin Huerter is really good off the bench. I wouldn't necessarily want him starting, but again, as an off the bench shooting guy, that's a great guy who's going to make a lot of 3-pointers. Rajon Rondo and Gallinari are going to be also great just because if they're going to affect Atlanta's culture. Atlanta, they have such a young core, and, we thought that maybe they would be decent last year. They ended up not very good at all. So they really do not know how to win. Rajon Rondo is a proven winner. Gallinari has been part of Gallinari was part of the Clippers 2 years ago, who that team overachieved and made the playoffs and beat the Warriors twice in the playoffs. And then last year, he was part of a massively overachieving Thunder team. So Gallinari has been part of winning teams as well. So I think it's really going to add, from a chemistry perspective, it's going to be a great fit both on the basketball court and off the court. And I think the Hawks are going to make the playoffs. 5 seed, with the East, the Raptors aren't going away because they just signed Van Fleet. The Bucks get Drew Holiday. So I don't know if 5 seed seems a little bit much. I mean, it could happen because you're right. The Nets, some of these teams might not be as good in the regular season. And so the Hawks could have it, they could just be good right away. But I think the Hawks, it might take a little bit of time to figure out their rotations because they can play with so many lineups. But I think they're going to be a playoff team for sure.
Yeah, to go off what Thomas said, which I really liked, I think you can play Gallinari at the 4, and then you can play Onyeka Okongwu at the 5. And we saw that last year, similarly with the Thunder, they played Gallinari, I believe, at the 4 as well, and it was really effective. So the thing I like about Atlanta the most is the offensive versatility, and even defensive versatility too, because Cam Reddish, I think, could be a breakout guy next season. I know he struggled in college at Duke and then didn't really have a great rookie season. He's obviously got the intangibles and the ability to shoot the ball really well, so I expect him to have a better season. You have guys like DeAndre Hunter, Kendrick Dunn, guys that can really be good defenders, and I think that's why we mentioned on the show Tyrese Halliburton might get drafted at that spot, just so they could pair up Trae Young with a guy at the shooting guard position who could really defend. And I still like the Onyeka Okongwu pick because we all agree. I don't think nobody would say John Collins is a max player and probably never will be. So he probably will get moved based on what he's going to want money-wise. But, yeah, I think I agree with Thomas. While I don't know about 5 seed, this team is a lock for the playoffs. I think they have so much to offer. I think whether they trade guys, Clint Capella, John Collins, I think no matter what, this team's got a really deep team that's going to make the playoffs in the East.
To address the Megatronny's comment, I think they finish above Brooklyn because I think Brooklyn is going to be load managing all year long. I know I wouldn't take them in a playoff series. In fact, I probably wouldn't take Atlanta over any of these guys in terms of a playoff series. But I'll take them over the Nets. I think the Nets are going to be load managing all year. I don't think they're really going to care. I think it's going to take some time for them. I think they're more of a playoff team. And unpopular opinion, maybe, I don't care. I think they'll be better than Miami. I think Miami peaked last year, to be quite honest with you. I think that they're going to take a step back this year. And last year they made the finals. I don't even know if they'll make it past the first round this year. I'm really just not big on Miami in general. I wasn't last year. That came back to bite me, and maybe it'll come back to bite me this year. But I don't see it with Miami.
I couldn't disagree more. They're not a first round exit in the Eastern Conference.
Who would you have them beating? I'm not taking them over Milwaukee. I'm not taking them over Philly. I'm not taking them over Boston.
Depends on the
I'll take them
matchup.
over Boston in a heartbeat.
They did
I'll take them
beat
over Boston in a
pretty much all those teams in the playoffs last year.
I mean, yeah, they did.
Milwaukee
Boston hasn't improved.
Holiday trade. We'll see how that pans out. But all those other teams you mentioned, I could easily see Miami.
Yeah, and I mean, let's face it. I'll just address Miami quickly. I think Miami, they could have possibly hit their ceiling just because making the finals was so amazing. I don't think they're going to be a first round exit. So I'm a little bit in the middle on this. I think with their ability to possibly get a Giannis or a max player, I definitely don't think that they've hit their ceiling if they can get like if Kawhi opts out. Like if they can just get a super max kind of player.
Well, in terms of this current role.
And to address Thomas's point, and to address Will and Thomas's point, you said the Miami Heat peaked. Making the finals and losing to the Lakers in 6 games is a damn good peak. I mean,
sure, absolutely, but I don't think they reached that level again. And last year, they were still a 5 seed. Like it's not like Miami was a 1 seed and they were a 5 seed in the regular season. They were not that great of a team in the regular season, and they actually went to the most overtimes of anyone in the league with teams like the Bulls and the Hawks, or who were bad last year. So yeah, I would take Brooklyn because I really just don't know with the load management, and they may have some injury struggles, and I would take them over Miami. That may be an unpopular opinion. I don't care.
They were also a team that seemed built for the postseason. You know, like you said, they were actually behind the Pacers. I believe they finished with the same record as the Pacers, but I think
they did.
The Pacers won more regular season games, which is kind of crazy because they got swept in the playoffs. But whatever. And you know, because they were a team that was really built for the postseason, I think that I'm not going to give up hope that they can make the finals again, especially if they could get a supermax kind of player next year. And also Bam. I mean, Bam still has more room for improvement. Bam still cannot shoot. Like imagine a Bam Adebayo that can shoot the 3. That is incredible. If Tyler Herro can just be more consistent when it comes to, like, we all see the scoring ability, but if he can just be more consistent, then I think this Miami team could get back to the finals.
Yeah, in terms of Miami, like they did get better. I mean, they added Precious Achiuwa. I know you guys aren't high on him, but
I know.
we know Miami is good at developing talent, just raw talent. We know they're good at that.
Well, so they'll have more energy on the court.
Maybe they could do the same.
Yeah.
They don't need Precious to be an offensive piece. I know Miami is lacking spacing. That's their biggest issue. But in terms of the Precious pick, maybe they can develop him into a better player than you guys could think he will be. So
and they also signed Avery Bradley, which is good because
I love the Avery Bradley pickup.
Yeah,
that was a great.
What I'm gonna say about Precious, I was harsh on him in the last episode, to put it nicely, but this draft was so team dependent. A lot of with this draft, like there were so many guys that had the talent, but it just really came down if they were put in the right situation. And Precious, who's I will give him credit this time, he's a madman on defense. He's shown signs of defensive versatility and rim protection. I think with Miami, it's a solid fit. I do have my questions with him, but I will admit that I could end up being wrong about him because I think Pat Riley could see something in Precious that I don't. I could be right, but I also could be very wrong about him.
Yeah.
So we're gonna, before we address more signings, we could just get into the Montrezl Harrell signing right now. Actually, so Montrezl Harrell signed with the Lakers last night. They also picked up Dennis Schroeder via trade, Danny Green, the 28th pick, and they also picked up Wesley Matthews. Guys, do you think the Lakers are significantly better than last year's team? And do you think Harrell will help them in ways that they haven't had.
Significantly better? No. But they're definitely better, and I don't really think there's any disputing that. Dennis Schroeder was the real sixth man of the year. It's not Montrezl Harrell didn't deserve it. Dennis Schroeder's the real sixth man of the year, so I'm going to refer to him as the sixth man of the year. Just a great score, improved his shooting efficiency drastically, especially from 3-point range. I think he fits well next to LeBron. His ability to create his own shot. I think that'll be big for them at times. Montrezl Harrell, I'm not high on him. I mean, let's look at what happened in the playoffs. He was basically unplayable because he was so bad on defense, and he can't shoot. And when you can't shoot and can't play defense, that limits who you are as a player. And
he's short.
Yeah, he's like 6'7" or 6'8" or something like that, and can't really protect the rim whatsoever. So I don't think he really does much for the Lakers. I think he's a solid bench piece, but come playoff time, like how many minutes are you really going to give him? But Schroeder's a great pickup. Wes Matthews is a great pickup. I don't really think there's too much of a difference between him and Danny Green.
We have breaking news. The Knicks have just signed Nerlens Noel. Wow. I mean,
the Celtics had to go out and sign Tristan Thompson, and Nerlens Noel was there.
Sean, if you're hearing this, you got your superstar center, Nerlens Noel, joining the Knicks.
I will miss Nerlens Noel, but yeah. Well, I forgot. Sorry, that threw me off track. I forgot what we were talking about.
You were going on about Wesley Matthews.
Matthews. I think Matthews is a good pickup. I don't think there's much of a difference between him and Danny Green, and hopefully he can show up in the playoffs, unlike Danny Green. So, yeah, I definitely think that right now I would probably have the Lakers winning it all because I think Schroeder is a really good addition. Matthews is a good addition, and Harrell is going to be a solid addition in the regular season, even if he's not that great in the playoffs.
Will?
Yeah, so to me, the Lakers are doing an amazing job. I mean, Rob Pelinka deserves a lot more credit than he's been getting, really just for, obviously bringing in LeBron and trading for Anthony Davis and doing what they did with the roster last year, but also for what they're doing now. I mean, they realize that there are, the field is better than they were last year because of the Nets. Klay Thompson injury definitely hurts the Warriors, but they are still there. Like Steph Curry and Draymond Green are still there, and the Warriors still have a really good team. But again, the deck is just more stacked when it comes to the field, so it's going to be tougher. But the Lakers are going out and making big-time moves. Dennis Schroeder, as great as Rondo is in the playoffs, I think Dennis Schroeder is just an overall better player. I mean, he's one of the best bench players in the league, and he should have won Sixth Man of the Year, as we all, think he should have. And he can play off ball as well. He was one of the, I believe he shot over 40% from his, catch and shoot three. So he can be an off ball player.
We have another signing report after the Nerlens Noel one. We have Jeff Teague to the Celtics 1-year deal. I think he's a good backup.
Okay. Good. All right.
What was the point in Peyton Pritchard? What was the point?
Oh boy. Yeah, but anyways, to move on, I'll keep talking about the Lakers. But I think the Lakers are better. I wouldn't say significantly because I think the Montrezl Harrell was really good just because you're taking something away from the Clippers, which still might be your biggest threat, to be honest, with the Klay Thompson news. Maybe the Clippers are still there. They're still relevant. And they still have a really good team. So you're taking him away from the Clippers. I think it's more of a luxury. Like you didn't need Montrezl Harrell. But, considering the fact that you lost Dwight Howard, and JaVale McGee really offers you nothing when it comes to offensive production. Now you have a guy who can go, I think he can coexist with Anthony Davis just because of how great Anthony Davis is. Like you can put Anthony Davis anywhere on the court and he's going to be a very effective player, which will allow Montrezl Harrell to be decent. Defensively, he won't be. And it's another guy for LeBron. He can kind of mismatch hunt with the bigs. LeBron loves doing that. So I think it can be good offensively. But again, when it comes to Montrezl Harrell, the true value, will he show up in the playoffs? Like, are we getting playoff Montrezl Harrell or are we getting regular season Montrezl Harrell? Because if we get regular season, then it will be really good. But if you get playoffs, then it really won't do much. And I could see him really not getting very many minutes. And then the Wesley Matthews is a good signing.
In terms of Montrezl Harrell, I put out a tweet earlier this morning or last night about Montrezl Harrell, which is I think he's one of the more overrated bench pieces in the NBA. He doesn't offer much offensive value. He's not a good playmaker. He's not a great scorer. I mean, He can't shoot. He can't extend the floor. He all he does really on the court at a high level is finishing inside, and even then, I'd rather have other guys do that. He can rebound a little bit, but defensively, like you guys have all mentioned, he's a terrible defender for his position, especially at the big man position, which is becoming more prevalent nowadays. He's going to be a terrible matchup problem, and he might even be a liability. I know having AD as a rim protector settles eases that pain with which comes with Montrezl Harrell a little bit more than what the Clippers had. They didn't have a rim protector, so I think Harrell will be more effective on the Lakers than he was on the Clippers in the playoffs. But it still doesn't offer much over Dwight Howard. I think Dwight Howard is a more valuable piece to this Lakers team. His rim protection was elite. He really had a resurgence, and as a lob threat, pick and roll partner, I think Dwight Howard was ideal. So I think Montrezl Harrell is a better player than Dwight Howard. I don't think anyone disputes that. But in terms of the fit for this Lakers team, I think losing Dwight Howard would probably be a much bigger deal than people are making it out to be.
Yeah, in terms of how much better this team, I agree with Thomas. I don't think it's a wide margin, but it is to get better. Dennis Schroeder is a really good, probably really underrated point guard as well. I think not many people talk about him, and he was pretty good in Atlanta, showed a lot in OKC last season. But like Will mentioned, I think losing our Montrezl Harrell to the Lakers is not as big as like getting how much he'll improve, but more just taking away from what the Clippers had. I know he wasn't great in the playoffs, but that's still another piece they had. And the Clippers are kind of, I don't know what they're really going to do yet. We have to see what they do with their main guys yet. But for the Lakers, I think this team improved a little bit. Wesley Matthews will help a team that was, I believe, 21st in 3-point shooting last season. So that is one flaw, I guess, but I'm sure he'll help. I think he shot 38% from three last season. And then you lose Avery Bradley, but he wasn't even in the bubble, so it didn't really matter because they won the championship. But he was solid in the regular season. But yeah, overall, I agree with both of you. I think it's not a great improvement, but it's an improvement for a team that probably is the NBA champion team, in my opinion, right now.
Aiden?
Yeah, I really don't have much more to add. I'd just be echoing what you guys said. The Lakers, at this point, they're still front runners for the title. We obviously still need to see how the rest of the offseason shakes out. And if any more injuries pop up, hopefully not. But yeah, right now the Lakers, again, I think they got a little bit better. Definitely not significantly better. But the big signing, not big signing, but the big trade was obviously Dennis Schroeder. I think that was easily their biggest addition of the offseason. It was a great one for them. So yeah, I'd just be echoing what you guys said. They're front runners, and they did get a little better this offseason.
Jared, you asked us thoughts on the Hawks. We actually talked about the Hawks earlier. This replay will be available.
We love the Hawks, though, just to put it in one sentence.
Replay will be available.
We're all very high on the Hawks next season. We all think they're going to be possibly a top 5 seed in the Eastern Conference. So, yeah, that's pretty much a recap of what we said over the Hawks. So, we're going to get to one more team. We also have a final topic, but the Detroit Pistons, does anybody know what they're doing? Like,
No.
What are they trying to do? They signed Mason Plumlee. They drafted Isaiah Stewart. They signed Jahlil Okafor. Like, these are bigs, but not even bigs that can stretch a floor. All of them just clog the thing back to the basket. Doesn't provide much value. Maybe Isaiah Stewart can, since the jury's out on what he's going to do in the NBA. But Jahlil Okafor and Mason Plumlee, I mean, I guess they're okay. What do you guys think they're doing? Is this good for Killian Hayes' development or no?
I mean, like, it never hurts to, have a big that you can just drop it down low to and he can score for you at times with Jahlil Okafor and Stewart. But, like, why? Like, just you're paying Mason Plumlee $25 million. Like, that just makes no sense. I did like the signing of Jeremy Grant. I thought the Josh Jackson move was solid as well. But Jahlil Okafor and Mason Plumlee, on top of drafting Isaiah Stewart at 16,
they still have Blake Griffin. He's not traded to the Nuggets.
They still have Blake Griffin. Like, I thought they had a real, like, Killian Hayes at 7, that was a steal. Sadiq Bey at 19, that was a steal. And I would have given them an A+ draft had they not reached for Stewart at
He would
16.
have been available a half a round later.
And they got Saban Lee.
He was getting. I will say about Isaiah Stewart, he was getting some buzz as early as the late teens, early 20s. Do I think he's that valuable? No, I had a second round grade on him. But yeah, he was getting that type of buzz. Do I think he should have been picked that high again? No, it was like Zeke Naji. Do I think that guy should be going 22? No, not at all.
That was
To address Kimberly's comment in the comment sections, Trez will be a lot better than Dwight. That's not what I was saying, though. We all think Montrez is a better player than Dwight. It's just we believe that Dwight was a more valuable player to the Lakers based on what he provided compared to what Trez provided.
Right.
And another point which you made, Gasol. There are rumors that Gasol wants to go back to Spain. It hasn't been confirmed, but Noel signed with the Knicks about 3 minutes ago. So.
and also we all said the Lakers improved. It's just
I don't think they got vastly better. Like enough to the point where it's
significantly no.
You don't think they got
Like-
a lot better, but they definitely improved. Schroeder,
Definitely.
Schroeder's the main emphasis. The fact that they improved Rajon Rondo to Dennis Schroeder, and they traded only Danny Green and replaced him as well. That's really why they got better. It's not because of what Montrez is going to provide, because what he provides, they already really have at every other position.
Right. I think if the Lakers got significantly better, that would have been them like getting a third star, which would have had to be like an absolute finesse, which isn't even possible just based on their roster.
Yeah, I just going back on the Pistons, like I like Killian Hayes, I like Sadiq Bey, but they did a pretty terrible job. And on top of that, Luke Kennard, he was a guy who averaged like 16 and 4.
They traded Luke Kennard for Sadiq Bey. They traded Luke Kennard for.
Oh, they did. Okay, I thought they traded them for a second round pick for some reason.
No, they traded him for that 19th pick and they took Bey there.
Okay, that's not terrible, but yeah, the Pistons is just a weird one. I'm excited to see Killian Hayes, but just like they're going to be a weird team next year.
Yeah, their draft. Listen, like what Thomas said, like the Killian Hayes pick, A+, best prospect of the draft in my opinion. They have a guy that can build around. They were desperate for a guard. The Sadiq Bey, I know they traded Luke Kennard to get Bey, and Kennard's maybe going to be a little better like next season, but Kennard was not signing back. He was just going to be here for one more year, and then he was.
Kennard has honestly peaked. I think Kennard is.
Yeah, I mean he's basically at a ceiling already because he doesn't provide much more than just his shooting, and he's a great shooter nonetheless. But the Pistons have been shopping him forever now, and I don't think Kennard was interested in returning. You get a guy like Bey, he's a perfect fit. They need some 3-and-D wings. And even the signing of guys like Jeremy Grant and Josh Jackson, as Thomas said, those were great. But then there's the flip side. It was either great moves to the Pistons or terrible moves to the Pistons. The Isaiah Stewart pick, again, it was a reach. It wasn't an awful pick. But when you factor in that they signed guys like Jahlil Okafor and Mason Plumlee for all that money, like what are they doing? What is the point? After their draft, I was like, you know what, the Pistons, maybe they're making some strides. And then after I saw their free, like, no, just forget it. I don't know why would you do that? I'm not sure. Like, I'm just baffled. If I'm a Pistons fan, I try to take the positives away just because you guys have been in a drought for so long, but there's clear negatives that are going to hurt.
Yeah.
The Pistons, I don't know the Pistons seem to be doing this weird thing where they're trying to get young and build a young core, but they're also trying to remain competitive, and they just need to pick a lane, and that lane needs to be to get younger and build a young core. And so I'm not sure what these free agent signings are really doing. I mean, not all of them are bad, but the fact that they've just done way too much. I mean, I'm just looking at a complete list of all the front court players they're going to have next season. They still have Blake Griffin. You have Tony Bradley, Dwayne Dedman, Mason Plumlee, Jahlil Okafor, Isaiah Stewart, Sadiq Bey, plays a 3-4. Sekou, who they drafted last year, is more of a 4. That's like 8 players in their front court.
Do they still have Thon McCoy or no?
They saw Thonmaker. Okay, that's 9 players in their front court. That is ridiculous. That is just insanity. I don't know what the Pistons. So the Pistons, they made the obvious moves, like Killian Hayes at 7. That's pretty obvious. You take Killian Hayes at 7, and then Sadiq Bey at 19. That's good, also good value. So they kind of took the obvious moves, but they're just making some stupid decisions by giving out all this money. And they didn't even get Christian Wood back, who was a player that broke out for them last year. and that you should have just given all the money.
They signed all those big men, and the one they didn't bring back was Christian Wood. That didn't make any sense.
Actually, would have been a young piece for them to build with, Killian Hayes.
Yeah.
So it just makes no sense.
It was the best big man, and you just let him go. The best
Exactly.
So I forgot to mention that. That was so stupid.
Right. They let Christian Wood go, and they replaced him with all these guys that are just like older.
I just don't know what the Detroit Pistons are hoping to accomplish. Like, they're clearly not tanking, but they're also not.
They should be.
Contend. I mean, they should be, and I feel like the draft, which Monty Bates will come into, will be rigged for them. So, in terms of the Pistons, I'm just confused. I can't put it any other way. You sign all those guys, you're not going to be bad enough to get a number 1 pick, but you're not going to be good enough to make the playoffs. So that's what I think.
Yeah, I agree with all your points. I think they were really good in the draft for the first couple of picks. Killian Hayes, I liked. I really thought he was one of the best prospects in the draft. And then Sadiq Bey, I think, is a guy that's going to come in and could be really effective right from the beginning. I think he was there at Villanova for a couple of years. He's going to come in and I think will be really effective for the Pistons. But you just mentioned it. Christian Wood, he goes to Houston Rockets. I think that should have been their first priority for a big man. Jeremy Grant is a really good player. I think we said that all throughout the playoffs. He was one of their better players for the Denver Nuggets. That's a pretty big loss for them. But I mean, Plumlee, it just doesn't make sense. And I think they still have Derrick Rose, which I expect they would probably move. They should move Blake Griffin as well. It's just a team that probably isn't even good enough to be a top 8 team in the East, but seems like they want to make the playoffs. So I don't understand it. I think their first couple picks in the draft were
that a sign and trade between the Celtics and the Hornets involving Gordon Hayward is being discussed. So the your Celtics won't lose complete value for nothing when Gordon Hayward signed.
Right.
Yeah, the Pistons with they're basically just like the island of misfit toys. Basically, I think that's what they were going for with Jackson, Jahlil Okafor. Like, I don't even want to talk about this anymore.
I kind of feel bad for Killian Hayes.
Yeah.
Sadiq Bey.
And Derrick Rose.
Yeah.
Especially.
But we're going to move on to the biggest winner, I feel, of the draft. Philadelphia 76ers. Philadelphia 76ers absolutely won this week. Mm-hmm. They drafted Tyrese Maxey, who, if you want to determine whether or not he's a good fit, that's up to you. I think he'll fit in well with their bench. But they also traded for Seth Curry. They got rid of Al Horford's contract. I mean, they made a lot of moves. They got Danny Green, Dwight Howard. This has been a great week for 76ers and 76ers fans. Do you guys think they're back into the top tier of the Eastern Conference? Because obviously last year, many people were high on them coming in, but after a while, people just kind of gained common sense and did not include them in terms of the Eastern Conference conversations. Do you guys think they've re-entered that stratosphere and could be possible championship contenders, or do you think that nothing has really changed in terms of how they're viewed among the leagues?
I would probably say they're up there. Like, I think that, first of all, Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, Philly fans have been crying. They're like, oh, yeah, they're a great fit together. They just have had no spacing. Well, now you've got the spacing. They're on the clock. Now it's time to see if they are a good pair. But in terms of the 76ers roster, I like what they did. Finally, they have shooters for the first time in a while. They unloaded on that horrific Al Horford contract, which OKC decided to pick up on.
That's our second best player.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. And they drafted guys like Isaiah Joe, Tyrese Maxey, and they got Seth Curry, obviously. And Tobias Harris had his best. Like, he put up really great numbers in LA with Doc Rivers as his coach and can finally play his natural position. He can finally play power forward, which is the position he's supposed to be playing. So, yeah, in terms of the Philadelphia 76ers, I definitely think they're up there. I think they're going to be a top 3 seed for this upcoming season. But more importantly, we're going to see if this Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid pairing is really legit. And there is no excuse this time.
Right, and
I don't know how you can't view the 76ers as a better team now. Like, You look at it again. I think I brought this up in the past 3 seasons. You look at 2019, 2020, 2018, 2019, and then 2017, 2018. 2017, 2018 has been their best year of the 3. And what happened that year was they had shooting around Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. Now they go out and they trade for Seth Curry. They get rid of Al Horford's contract to bring in Danny Green. And then in the draft, they draft Tyrese Maxey, Isaiah Joe, and Paul Reed. Bang, bang, bang. 3 amazing picks right there.
I forgot about
Paul Reed. That was a phenomenal pick. That's a first-round talent at the back end of the second round.
58.
Pick number 55.
Yep. And I just look at the 76ers again. I'm telling you right now that there's still hope for the Ben Simmons-Joel Embiid pairing. There's still hope. Now, as Thomas said, they're on the clock. They are on the clock. But, I look back at 2017 and 2018. If you put shooting around these guys, there's hope. I said it a couple podcasts ago or shows ago that they had the highest half-court offensive rating in NBA history with that team that year. And again, it was all due to that shooting around them, around Ben Simmons and around Joel Embiid. But then Elton Brand decided to bring guys like Al Horford and Tobias Harris and get rid of guys like Marco Bellinelli and just J.J. Redick and a ton of these shooters because he wanted to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. He wanted to try to get bigs who could shoot. And it didn't pan out. But now Daryl Morey's coming in as the president of basketball operations. They're reshuffling the deck. You got rid of Al Horford's contract. Shooters are in. They're on the clock, but they certainly should be viewed as a better team than what we saw last year.
Yeah, I think, Aiden, you said my point. I was going to say credit needs to be given to Daryl Morey, especially. Say what you will about, he didn't win. I mean, he put together a really good teams in Houston.
He's not the one on the basketball court.
Right, exactly. But Daryl Morey is a really good GM, and he's finally doing what the Sixers should have been doing, as we've previously stated. Because, you paid, you got Tobias Harris, you brought in Jimmy Butler, which was cool. That was good. Honestly, that was the year where you did the best when you actually had Jimmy Butler. And we're really close to going to the Eastern Conference Finals. But you got rid of a Robert Covington and just guys who fit with this team pretty well. And you didn't pay J.J. Redick, but now you're bringing in a guy like Seth Curry, who's basically does exactly what J.J. Redick does, which is just shoot threes, and they both do it at an extremely high clip. They've got I would say an A+ on their draft just because in terms of value, I mean, they got steals at basically every single one of their picks. And now, Josh Richardson was cool, but, he just wasn't a very good fit with Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. And so I think Danny Green's a solid fit with them. If he can just be more reliable from 3, hopefully he improves from what he was doing in the playoffs. And credit needs to be given to Daryl Morey because he's doing, what the Sixers have been doing is they've just been prioritizing big names. And those big name players like Tobias Harris doesn't really fit with, the core that the Sixers have. But now they're finally getting role players that will actually fit. And that's going to give the Sixers the best chance to compete for a championship.
Christian.
Yeah, I agree with all the points you guys made. I think on draft night, we saw them make the move to get rid of Al Horford's contract. I think that was a fantastic move to get rid of him, not only just for this season, but I think it was 3 years left. So that'll help them in the future as well. But yeah, like you said, Aiden, they've been getting rid of shooters progressively year after year. And then finally now they're bringing in shooters, which you mentioned it before. I mean, all 3 of those picks were really important for them. All 3 steals. So I would also give them an A+ as well because it was a fantastic draft overall. But yeah, this team is definitely a top team in the East now. I think they're running out of time though. I think the clock is ticking because if it doesn't work again this season, I would question if they do make a move next offseason. But it seems like they're ready to go for next season. Doc Rivers is certainly an upgrade over Brett Brown. So I'm excited to see how this team pans out, but they got the shooting they needed. They did everything well so far this offseason. So I think they're a top team in the East for sure.
Yeah, and I think the clock is especially ticking because Daryl Morey is not afraid at all to make a move. Like Daryl Morey would be the number 1 GM that would be willing to break up a core of Embiid or Simmons and make a trade to just improve the roster just because that's what he did every single year in Houston.
And keep in mind that this roster looks really similar to the one we saw in Ben Simmons' rookie year. The one with J.J. Redick, Ersan Ilyasova, Robert Covington, Tyrese Maxey, Seth Curry, Isaiah Joe. You're just replacing shooters with shooters. And perimeter defenders with perimeter defenders. They're just trying to replicate the same success that they had, which is probably the best idea, which they should have been doing for the past couple of years instead of trying to sign Al Horford and mess up the spacing. So I think Philadelphia absolutely won this week along with Atlanta, and I think they're in a good place moving forward. But I think that's going to do it. Thank you guys for tuning in. It was really fun. As always, we'll be back next Friday breaking down stuff going into the season. Training camp starts soon. So it's an exciting time to be an NBA fan. So thank you
Yeah,
guys.
wait, before we go,
Absolutely.
I have a candidate for worst take of the week from our guy Tom.
Yeah, Tom, like, come on, man.
Stop, Tom. Anyways, carry on, Pranav.
Yeah, but thank you guys for tuning in as always. We'll be back next week. Training camp starting soon. Exciting times to be an NBA fan. We're out. Peace.
1 month out.
Is this the dagger?